All right, let's play with a model and get familiar with cap rate, loan to value, interest rate, and eventually your cash on cash yield, and two stress tests, debt yield and debt constant, how they relate. So as you know, cap rate is the return on overall spend. If something costs you $700,000 and you have to buy it at a 7 cap, it's going to generate 7% of $700,000 in net operating income, which is the profit that a piece of real estate makes before debt service, which is principal and interest down here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the different cap rates, different LTVs, different interest rates, and different amortization schedules affect your overall cash on cash yield. Now, cap rate is measured in different time periods. There's an in-place cap rate, meaning the performance of the previous 12 months before you buy it or when you're measuring it. There's the going in cap rate, which is how I measure basically the first year of performance under my projections, what I am going to do with a property. And there's the stabilized cap rate, which means when I get the rents up, when I get the value added, what's my cap rate look like then? That's sometimes called a pro forma cap rate, year 2 cap rate, year 5 cap rate, whatever it is. So let's look at an example deal here, and we're going to talk about it. So I just got an email of a self-storage facility investment opportunity. I'm probably going to look at this one. Great pictures, right? Snowy. But as you see, price $700,000, year 1 cap rate at 7.79%. And as you know, you can't trust brokers' numbers, but for this example, we're going to trust them. And we're going to assume that after I put it through my own underwriting, that you can see exactly what the pro forma cap rate is going to be. So let's talk about it. 7%, it's actually, what was that number? 7.79% cap rate. So let's plug that in. Total cost, $700,000. Now, how are we going to leverage this thing? And that's a big question. So let's think about it as we go here. Basically, what this broker is telling me that year 1, I can generate $54,530 in net operating income. Now, interest-only scenario and a profit or a principal and interest scenario are different. If I can negotiate interest only, 1 year of interest only with my bank, meaning I only have to pay principal or I only have to pay interest for the first year, this is what it would look like. $21,000 in interest, that if I get a 4% interest rate and I lever it up 75%. So this loan to value basically means the percentage of the overall cost that I get a loan for. If I decide to only lever it up 50%, my loan's only $350,000. If I lever it up 80%, which is generally close to the maximum, my loan is $560,000. What does it look like at a 75% LTV, 4% interest rate, and a 25-year amortization schedule? When you buy a home, obviously, you get a 30-year mortgage. That's pretty rare in commercial real estate unless you go with a commercial mortgage-backed security or some long-term debt. Most of the time, it's 20 to 25 years. We did a lot of our early deals on a 20-year AM. Now we're lucky enough to get 25-year AMs on most of our deals, which means we're going to pay off this loan over 25 years. Now, 75% LTV in a principal and interest only scenario or an interest only scenario, we have a cash on cash yield of 19%. The debt yield. Now, the debt yield is a stress test, meaning what the amount of debt that I have, how much net operating income is that yielding? It's the net NOI divided by the loan amount. And our loan amount is $525,000. Our net operating income is $54,000. So our debt yield is 10.39%. If I lever it up less, if I do a 50% leverage, our debt yield goes way up. Our debt yield is levered or is 15.58%. And I have a mortgage calculator on the second tab. I'm going to give you guys a copy of this in the next section of the exam before you do a little quiz. But yeah, this is how it works. So let's say we go back to 75% LTV, 4% interest rate, 25-year amortization schedule. What's my cash on cash yield going to look like the very first year? Well, I have $54,000 in net operating income, and I have $21,000 in interest. So $33,000 and some change in free cash flow, a 19.16% cash on cash return. That is phenomenal, right? But let's assume the broker wasn't really that accurate. It's not really a 7.79 cap. It's more like a 7 cap. All right, our cash on cash yield, obviously our net operating income goes down $49,000, and our interest expense stays the same. Our free cash flow goes down to $28,000. Our cash on cash is 16%. Not too bad. Now let's say the total cost instead of $700,000 is $750,000 because we have some closing costs. Okay, now all things equal, 7 cap, we're generating $52,500 in net operating income. Free cash flows, 30 grand. Interest only, we got a 16% cash on cash. Now, if we have principal and interest, if we're paying principal and interest, our free cash flow is $16,871, and that's on $187,000 and $500 invested for 9% cash on cash. Now, you see how this cash on cash yield starts to go down. Your debt yield and your debt constant get closer and closer together. So the problem here arises is that if your debt constant and your debt yield touch, if these two are equal, you're making zero money. So let's change our interest rate to 7% and see what happens. If we have a 7% interest rate, obviously our interest goes way up, $39,000 versus $22,000. So if we enter a high interest rate environment, boom, our interest rate goes up, debt yield and debt constant, wow, they're very close, and we have very little free cash flow. Let's take it up to 8%, take an interest rate up to 8%, see what happens. Ooh, they're almost touching. Our debt yield and our debt constant are almost touching. We have very little, $400 in free cash flow. Let's take it to 8.25%. Boom, we're negative. Our debt constant has outgrown our debt yield, and now we have negative cash flow. This asset is losing money. If we buy a 7 cap asset and we have to pay principal and interest on a 25-year term, we are losing money. Let's say the banks tighten up a little bit and we got to go on a 20-year term. Boom, even worse. Our debt constant's up to 10.22%. Now you can hedge this risk by lowering your amount of debt. Let's say we put more cash down. We only lever the thing up 50%. We put $375,000 of cash down, and we have a $375,000 loan amount. Now, our interest and principal are much lower because our loan amount is a lot lower. Our free cash flow, only $14,000, a 3.78% cash on cash yield. All these numbers look a little bit better, obviously, if we have interest only. That's why a lot of investors fight for interest only. But this right here is a matrix that will allow you to play with different scenarios. Now, let's say we buy a really good deal, a 10 cap deal. Let's say we lever it up to 80%, and let's say we get a really good interest rate, 4%. And let's say we get the max amortization schedule. We're able to negotiate with our banker, 25-year amortization schedule. So now we have a $750,000 asset, $600,000 loan. We only have to put $150,000 of our own cash in, and every year we have $75,000 of net operating income. All these things are very good. High cap rate means a lot of yield for you. LTV, you're levering it up. You got a lot of debt. Interest rate's pretty low. Let's just say 3%. Let's get even crazier. Boom, cash on cash yield in an interest-only environment, 38% cash on cash yield. And see the spread. Look at the spread. Your debt constant, your cost of debt's only 3% a year. Your debt yield, basically the amount of net operating income that your debt is generating is 12.5%. So you're making a lot of money. Now let's just go back to some normal terms here. We'll play around with this a little bit more. See, our cap rate is a little bit more aggressive. People are buying about 6.5 caps all day now, getting interest rates around 4%. Here we are. We got $187,000 in cash invested, and even in our not interest-only environment, we have $13,000 of free cash flow. So this is if you play around with this, you can really get a feel for your cash on cash and your debt yield and your debt constant, which is kind of a correlation between risk here. How spread out are these two figures? How spread out is your debt yield and your debt constant? The further they are apart, the more wiggle room you have in investment. So what we're going to do in the next section is we're going to go through and we're going to play with, okay, you get this, you're buying at this going in cap rate, you have this LTV, and you're securing debt at this amount. What's your cash on cash yield? And that's a really good exercise. Let's say we buy something for $1 million. Let's say we buy it at a 5.5 cap. We're buying really a prime asset right now. And let's say, like most people can, we're getting a really good interest rate and we're achieving interest only. Look at this. We're still able to achieve a 12.25% cash on cash. This is how people are able to buy 5.5 caps because the debt gets cheaper. The debt gets cheaper. Maybe they have an interest only scenario. Maybe they have a 25-year AM. Maybe they have a really low interest rate. If the interest rate creeps up, boom, your cash on cash gets crushed. Interest rate's 6%. boom, your cash on cash is getting even more crushed. And if you're forced to pay principal and interest, you're losing money every single month because your debt yield is greater than your debt constant. So this is all stuff that you can play with. I'm going to put this spreadsheet right here in the next section, and I'm going to do a little quiz so that you can calculate some things yourself and you get a feel for how to analyze some investments.